Thank you for joining us today in the our session for ISO 27001 implementation workshop. Today we will cover module number 8 and 9. And these two modules, we will cover the last two clauses of ISO 27001. Yesterday, we started in module number 8 and we went through the requirements for the clause number 9. And today, we will try to repeat what did we explain very quickly as a quick refresh for your information and just to remind you with the information which we mentioned yesterday. Module number 8 is the performance evaluation. And this performance evaluation, it will cover the ISO 27001 clause number 9, which consists of 3 sub-clauses. Clause number or sub-clause 9.1 for monitoring, measurement, analysis, and evaluation, 9.2 for internal audit, and finally 9.3 for the management review. For monitoring, we explained yesterday what are the requirements for the monitoring. Number 1, you have to define what are the objectives of the measuring and monitoring. What do you want to achieve? Based on the objectives, you have to define what you have to monitor. It may be assets, it may be processes, it may be systems, activities, whatever the asset which you will monitor, but you have to define what's exactly you want to be monitored. And who will be responsible for the activities of monitoring and measurements. Also, you have to define the frequency of the monitoring and what is the methodology and the tool which you will use in the monitoring process. Finally, you have to define the data analysis and evaluation frequency and the personnel who is responsible for them. These are the mandatory information which it should be available in your plan. And finally, of course, the analysis and evaluation data. It should be reported to who? Mainly, it should be reported, as we mentioned, to the top management, but of course, there may be other persons. It can be submitted to them as well to improve the ISMS and to improve the effectiveness and efficiency of the processes. Subclause 9.2, you have to develop an audit program. You have to appoint someone to be responsible for the audit program. You have to define the auditors or select the auditors to avoid any conflict of interest and conduct the audit. And finally, the audit results should be submitted to the top management. Finally, for clause number 9, we have the management review, where we have to prepare the management review documentation, conduct the review, prepare recommendation lists and action plan for the management recommendations. And finally, you have to define the responsible person for the who will follow up these recommendations and make sure that they are implemented inside and to review its effectiveness and efficiency. If we want to go in details about these requirements for the information conclusion, for For example, for the clause number 9, we have to understand some important information. As we mentioned yesterday, these are the definitions of monitoring, measurement, analysis, and evaluation. And we define what are the objectives of the monitoring and the measurement. You have to define exactly what are the objectives. It may be improve the ISMS processes and procedures. It may be the monitor and measurement of critical service and processes and assets. Confirm the compliance to the international and local laws and regulations, help the management and to provide them the information for decision making, and to provide a preventive approach for security incidents. Also, you have to define what you should monitor. What you should monitor, this of course, it depends upon your objective. Based on your objectives, you have to define what you have to monitor. Here, for example, it may be critical processes, procedures, activities, assets, compliance with laws and regulation, incident management, change management, configuration management, awareness program, internal audits, risk management process, risk treatment plan, business continuity, systems monitoring, ISMS processes. When all these processes and assets, it can be monitored to achieve better ISMS performance and better security context for your company. Also, you have to define the roles and responsibilities for the monitoring and measurement, and what is the responsibility for each one of them. We defined some responsibilities and we went through all of them yesterday. Who is responsible for monitoring and measurement? Of course, it will be very important that this information, it should be published and available for the users to understand the roles and responsibilities. Then very important that this information to be on hand with the persons who are responsible for measuring and monitoring. For monitoring and measuring frequency, and for methodology and tools, and for the frequency, we mentioned that the ISO 27001 does not indicate any recommendation for the frequency or methodology or tools. And we mentioned that this depends upon the organization, measurement and monitoring program and its objectives. Then ISO inspectors or ISO auditors, they will never ask you for any information related to tools or whatever, but they want to know the results. You know, we are caring about the results. I am not caring about how do you do these tasks. The data analysis and evaluation responsible person, we mentioned that this is very important to define who is the person who will be responsible for the evaluation of the data and make analysis, and who is the person which you have to provide this information to him. Okay, in clause number 2 for the internal audit, we mentioned that the audit, we have two types of audit, internal audits, and these are the audits which the companies we are doing for themselves by internal auditors, and the external audits which the company, it will do it by an external audit. And it will be very important steps that you have to define an audit program. And this audit program, it must contain the audit objectives. What is the objective of the audits? Of course, it can be a lot of things. It can be compliance with laws and regulations. It can ISMS performance and ensuring effectiveness and efficiency. It can be creating a new incident program. Whatever the reason why you are approach the organization by a new audit program, when you have to mention why do you want to develop this program. Also, you have to define the scope and boundaries to make it very clear what is the time frame for the audits, when it will be arranged, how long it will take, what are the expected results and the tools. what are the audit assets and processes. Also, you have to define the auditor's background and experience. This it will be very important because people who will audit the ISO 27001, they have to be familiar with the ISO and security control. Then they will be able to understand the organization implementation. You have to define what are the resources required for the audit program, and you must have the approval and commitment from the management by assigning resources and communicate the importance of the audit program for the mid-level managers. And you have to check the auditors and avoid any conflict of interest in choosing the auditors who will perform the auditing process. You have to assign a responsible person for the audit program. This it will be very important, and this person he will be responsible for checking the effectiveness and efficiency of the audit program and the stakeholders' expectations as well. Select auditors. This is very important. As we mentioned yesterday, we may have some conflict of interest in choosing the auditors. And we mentioned that the conflict of interest, it can happen if the auditor was working in the audit division or process 1 year before the audit date. You have to check the background of each auditor and make sure that there is no conflict of interest. Also, the auditor must have full privilege access to the resources, and this privilege, it must be assigned by the organization top management in a formal way. When no one he will prevent to provide them any data if they require. When you have to do the steps of the audit, of course, how you can do the audit. The audit, it's very easy. You have to check what are the procedures in the company. Then you have to check what is the existing implementation, make gap analysis. If you find any differences, that there is a gap here and there is any gap, then this will be considered as a findings. Findings in the audit means that it's some requirements which are not fulfilled. Findings in the audit, it means that some requirements which are not fulfilled, and this it must be handled by the asset owner, and we have to fulfill these requirements. Finally, the audit results, it should be submitted to the top management. The audit results, it should be submitted to the top management. And as we mentioned, the audit results, it should submit to top management only. It should not go to IT manager or security manager or whatever. But first hand, which it should receive it, it will be the top management. If the top management, we will handle these findings to the IT manager, security manager to check why they have these findings in their fields, that's fine. We don't have any problem. But the auditor, the internal auditor, he have to provide this information to the CEO direct or the top management. And as we mentioned before, the internal auditor must be reported directly to the CEO. Okay, we have the last process for the management review process, and we mentioned that management review process, it's one of the very important processes, and this, it will help for the continual improvement. It will help in the continual improvement of the ISMS, because the management, it will review all the implementation, and we have some documents which we have to review. First of all, we have to review the previous management review actions and recommendations from the last year. If these recommendations, actions are implemented or not. We have to check the reports from the monitoring and measurement processes. We have to check the internal audit reports and findings. We have to check the stakeholders' feedback and opinion. We have to check the ISMS continual improvement suggestions and results by the stakeholders, even we are internal or external. The risk assessment results and the risk treatment status. Also, we have to check the changes in the internal and external factors which is affecting the organization's conduct and business. These are the factors which it will help the management to review the ISMS and make sure that the ISMS processes are effective and efficiency for the company and it's achieving its goals and objectives, and it's matching the goals and objectives of the organization as well. On the other hand, the output of this process, it will be the recommendations or the actions required by the top management to improve the ISMS processes, to update the ISMS documentation based on the findings and the continual process and continual improvement by utilizing new tools, policies, procedures, assets, software, whatever which it can improve the ISMS implementation and the ISO. Okay. As you can see here, the follow-up management and review recommendation, we mentioned that after the management review meetings, we have to the meeting owner or the coordinator, he have to prepare minutes of meeting, he have to prepare the recommendation action plans, and these recommendation action plans, it must be prepared in and monitored as for regular reports for the top management to ensure that the recommendations and actions are performed and achieved in the live production field. Okay, any questions before going to how to implement these steps in XYZ company? Any questions?
No questions.
Okay. Now, after we went through all the details of the clause number 9 for the performance evaluation, we have to see how the XYZ company, it will implement these sub-clauses into its infrastructure. First of all, XYZ company understand the importance of rule and monitoring processes. We know that this is very important. This is a backbone of success of the ISMS and also the backbone of the continual improvement for the service. XYZ company, we realized that we don't have the required skills and competence. This is very important. After we make a gap analysis, for the competence, we discovered that we don't have the skills where we have to create the department for monitoring and measurement, because this is a little bit complicated. It requires skills, competence, staff who are understanding what is the attacks and what are the things which we have to monitor. We have to have the information about the assets and how we can monitor it, what are the proper measurements, how we can analyze the data. We must have a good experience in using the tools and so on. When this means that the company, we are not able, we don't have this competence. Besides, we figure out that also this division, it will be very costly compared with the XYZ company budget and financial situation. It will be very expensive with the company budget and financial situation. When the decision that we have to hire a third party, when we have to hire the third party. Also, XYZ company, we took this decision before, if you can remember, when we implement the SOC, the Security Operations Center. They understand that we don't have enough competence, and of course these SOC and monitoring and measurement are important as the clauses for the ISO 27001, and we want to pass the audit, when we decide that we have to go to third party to help them in this exercise. Although we mentioned that we have a limited budget and we have a financial situation, but this solution, it will be somehow cost-effective solution. Why? Because they will lease a SaaS monitoring and measurement service from a cloud service provider. Do you know what is SaaS? Do you know what is the SaaS? What is a SaaS expression? What does it stands for?
SaaS, SaaS. Yes, SaaS. You're asking about SaaS, right? SaaS, right?
SaaS.
Yes.
Software as a service.
Yes, software as a service.
Okay, software as a service. This is one of the cloud services. Of course, as students, now you have to concentrate a little bit about the cloud. The cloud, my friends, so this is considered the new era in the IT. In the IT, before we had something called the data center. People, they have to be familiar with the data center, switches, networks, applications, software, so on and so. Now, unfortunately, we are in a new era, and you have to be aware about this. Cloud it will be the dominant right now, and in some situation, we predict that 90% of the companies will not have a data center, and even we will not have IT manager, or we don't have developers or software developers. They will not be available. Why? Because the cloud eliminate all these job descriptions, and also the cloud it's changing the direction of the IT. Now the IT we are directing to the IT management rather than the IT technical, because now there is no need for the technical experience, because this it will be provided by the cloud service providers who will provide the applications and the infrastructure. Then what we have to do, we have to concentrate how we can utilize these services in our company. Anyway, now in the SaaS, this is as software as a service. What is a software as a service? This it will be a service provided by the cloud service provider. The XYZ company, they are not responsible about anything. They are not owning any devices. All the infrastructure required from hardware and software and monitoring and measuring tools, it will be owned by the cloud service provider. All what the XYZ company, we have to do that we have to collect the data from XYZ company in the form of logs or whatever, any events, incidents, non-conformity, and it will send this data through the internet. Then the cloud service provider, it will collect the data from XYZ company, and it will make the necessary measurement, analysis, and evaluation, and they warn the XYZ company security team if there is any event or incident or non-conformity. This means that this will eliminate the need for monitoring and measurement team and tools and infrastructure. And this means that on the XYZ company, we have to pay a monthly or yearly fees for this service and only. XYZ company, they assigned the CISO. He will be the contact person with the cloud service provider, and we request him to develop monitoring and measurement policy. And this it will be considered the agreement between the cloud service provider and the XYZ company to highlight their needs and requirements for the monitoring and measurements, and what are their objectives for the monitoring and measurement. Also, the XYZ company, we took the decision that this service it will be evaluated periodically to check if it's mandatory to renew the contract or to build their own infrastructure if they have the qualified competence to develop the department and its tools and assets inside the company, as we did with the same exercise with the CSO. And again, we mentioned that we will evaluate this every 2 years. Now for the internal audit, this clause number 9.2, internal audit, as I mentioned before, this is a very important requirements by ISO 27001. And if you want to invite the auditor, external auditor to audit your company, for the ISMS to be compliant with ISO 27001, you must implement the ISMS at least 3 months before the auditing, and at least one internal audit it should be conducted, and one management review it could be conducted. These are the conditions to allow the external auditor to come and check the compliance of the ISMS based on ISO 27001 requirements. The XYZ company decides that to hire an external auditor. ISMS XYZ company, we understand that we don't have the auditors, and it will be very expensive to hire an internal auditor. Just he will sit idle in the company, and only he will do the exercise maybe once or every 6 months. Then this it will be very expensive. Then they mentioned that it's okay, instead of having an internal auditor, we will get a hired external auditor, and we will ask for the services to come and do the internal auditing for us. Then this means that it's an external auditor, but it will do the exercise of the internal auditor. It's an external auditor because third party it will come and do it, but he will do the exercise of the internal auditor because he will audit the organization itself, and he will, for the compliance of the ISO 27001, to provide the compliance report into the management. Then they make sure that the ISMS it's implemented properly, or it requires some changes or modification. Okay, for the management review, which is 9.3, or the sub-clause 9.3 in the performance evaluation, the management they decide to make the management review, and it's very important for the requirements, and they decide that the CISO it will be responsible for preparing and helping in conducting the ISMS processes, and this it will be done every year. This management review it will be every year. CISO he will be responsible to collect the appropriate information, as we mentioned in the last phase, and also he will help the management to evaluate and review ISMS processes and efficiency. The management reviews recommendation, it should be documented to improve ISMS and to be changed into action plans. Then it can be implemented in the production. The internal auditor and ISMS coordinators. You know who are the ISMS coordinators? Do you remember who are the ISMS coordinators?
ISMS coordinators are the auditors from the ISM that give the certificate.
No. The ISMS coordinators, we are the persons from the business processes and divisions, and we are the dedicated person and for the project of ISMS and to implement the ISMS. This means that we are internal employees, internal staff. They are working in different departments and processes, and they are considered as the interface between their divisions, departments, and the ISMS implementation team. Then these coordinators and the auditors, they will be internal auditor, they will be responsible for reviewing the management recommendation and its action plan progress results to make sure that it's implemented as it's advised by the management. Finally, the last phase in the implementation, it will be the documentation, and for documentation, the management review, it is a mandatory documentation. Management review, it's a mandatory documentation, and it can be in form of minutes of meeting, it can be in action plan, it can be in email, whatever is the format. We don't care in ISO about the format, but we want to see the results and the management review for the activity, and we want to see that the management, they are follow up these actions and make sure that everything is running fine. Okay, as a quick recap for this module, we have the clause number 9, and it consists of 3 sub-clauses for monitoring, measurement, analysis, and evaluation. We have the internal audit, you have the management review, and here we had some good steps in the XYZ company regarding the implementation of ISMS and ISO 27001. That we have the XYZ company, we have SaaS service agreement for monitoring and measurement, and we ask the CISO to develop the management policy, monitoring and measurement management policy. Also, they request an external auditor to conduct the internal audit for the ISO 2700 implementation. The management, we arranged a management review meeting every year when we can review the ISMS effectiveness and efficiency. This was module number 8. Any questions?
No question.